Hey, welcome back, and this is another anime review. This time I'm going to be reviewing The Sunday Without God, and this is definitely a really interesting one too. It's one of the anime that I reviewed for the summer seasonal anime. It's actually the last one as well. It finished. When did it finish? It finished the 21st of September, but I've been kind of behind. But I actually recently put my episode 12 review out a few minutes ago, so you can go check that out if you want to, if you haven't yet. And yeah, so The Sunday Without God is directed by Yuji Kamizawa, and the music's by Hiromi Mizutani, and it's by Studio Madhouse. So already you can tell it's going to be amazing because it's by Studio Madhouse, which I actually did not know before. So if I did, I probably would have been better prepared for the awesomeness. And it's licensed by Sentai Filmworks, and it originally ran from July 6, 2013 to September 21st, 2013, and it ran for a total of 12 episodes. And it has a manga written by Kimihito Iri and illustrated by Abaraheki, and published by Fujimi Shobo. And demographic is shonen. Not really, no. And it originally ran from November 2010 and is still ongoing with a total of 4 volumes so far. And it also has a light novel based on it, written by Kimihito Ire and illustrated by Shino and published by Fujimi Shobo, and demographic is male. Depends, and even though that's not really a demographic. And originally ran from July 25th, January 25th, 2010. And it's still ongoing with a total of 8 volumes so far. So yeah, now I got that out of the way. Let's talk about the series. The Sunday Without God takes place in a world where forget how many years before the start of the series, but a certain amount of years before the start of the series, the world was abandoned by God. Alright, supposedly because too many souls were built up in both heaven and hell, and the world of the living. So God abandoned the world so that people couldn't die and people couldn't be born. Alright. However, he left the world with one last miracle, which was the Gravekeeper. The Gravekeeper is said to generically be, although I kind of disproves this, our main character, who I'll get to later on, but said to generically be an emotionless person, male or female, who travels the world endlessly in order to put the dead to rest. Because see, people can still technically die, but they'll just wake up as zombies, and the Gravekeepers are basically around to bury them and make sure that they can rest in peace. Now, Ai's mother was Hana, was a Gravekeeper before her, but she ended up dying, and immediately when she died, when I was like 12 or something, I took, or maybe even younger than that, I basically immediately took over for her as Gravekeeper. And that's where the show basically starts. Now, Ai Austin is our main character. She is a very outgoing and free-spirited girl who lives in a very small village. However, she didn't realize that her entire village was comprised of dead people, basically the zombies I mentioned before. Alright, she grew up without a father because her father, Hampney Hambart, was traveling the world somewhere else. Alright, and then there's also Hana, who is Ai's mother as well. two people who were Yoki and Anna were serving as Ai's foster parents basically after Ai's death, or after Ai's mother's death. But everyone in the village though is dead. She just didn't know that. And really that would make, she's technically part human, part gravekeeper. Alright. And that's one of the things that makes her interesting, and because of that because gravekeepers are supposed to be able to sense the dead, but since she's half and half, I guess she couldn't really sense them. So she lived for several years of her life thinking that she was surrounded by the living when really she was surrounded by the dead, and they of course didn't want, of course they wanted her to be happy, so they never really told her the truth. This of course included her foster parents. Everyone in her village was already dead. Alright. And that's basically where the show really gets started. Now, the series has a few different mini story arcs. The first one's called The Valley of Death, which takes up a total of 3 episodes, and that basically revolves around Ai learning the truth about her village, meeting an actual full gravekeeper named Scar, and also meeting her father, Hampney Hambart, although she doesn't know it's her father at first, and he doesn't know that Ai's his daughter at first either. And of course Hampney, has to end up dying in the end as well. I mean, I think it would have been really interesting as if Hampney would have continued along the adventure with them, but I think it's fitting for the emotions that he dies as well, so, not really any major complaints there. But another thing that's unique about Ai from other gravekeepers, such as Scar, a gravekeeper that she meets in this arc and actually stays throughout the rest of the series, is that gravekeepers are said to not really be born. They just appear from somewhere, and no one really knows where they come from. Alright, and that's really the major thing here, is that Hampney keeps denying that that Ai's a gravekeeper for a few reasons. One, she was born, she has relatives, she has emotions, is another thing, because gravekeepers aren't supposed to really have emotions. They're basically supposed to be mindless drones, in a sense, They don't really have emotions or feelings, they just go wherever the dead are to bury them. Alright, and that's basically what the first story arc's centered around. The second story arc is called the Ordis arc, which takes place throughout a total of 3 episodes once again. And this arc takes in the first arc, Ai meets a couple of characters that go with her to this arc. She meets Scar, the gravekeeper, of course, and she also meets an enemy of her father's, Julie, also sometimes called Yuri. I don't know why he's sometimes called that, but whatever. I'll just call him Julie. Alright, and Julie seems to know quite a bit about gravekeepers as well as this world, and the two of them basically hook up in this arc, and well, not hook up in that way obviously, but the two of them basically hook up in this arc and continue the journey throughout the rest of the series. And the Ordis arc takes them to a huge village called Ordis, which is basically the land of the dead. There are no living people allowed in this arc. Now, this was debatably my favorite of the arcs. Alright, we meet several new characters in this arc, such as there's first off, the princess of the arc, Ula Eulurus Hekmatika. Okay, and then there's Kiriko's, and Ula is the princess of Ordis, also known as the Idol of Murder. Her eyes are blindfolded and her body is fully clothed. Just before her birth, she had accepted her mother's wish before her death, that is, anybody that she sees, speaks to or touches will be killed by her, thus preventing her to have normal interaction with the living. She instead writes down her thoughts and uses Kiriko as a communication medium. Her written language is French. So that's, and then of course there's Kiriko Zubreska, an apprentice of a government office in Ordis. He was first found asleep in Julie's van while Julie, I, and Scar are on a journey. He is also really close with Princess Ula, being a schoolmate and a teacher. He was actually made of body parts from 5 people born of their wishes of having a child by a witch. He also ages much slower than a normal human, and has knowledge from the minds of the 5 people he was made from. And 3 of the 5 people are actually introduced. The other 2 aren't for some reason, but the 3 that are Rek, Pox, and Diva. Diva's the royal doctor of Ordis, Pox is the vice captain of the Ordis Imperial Guard, and Rek is the ambassador of Special Foreign Affairs of Ordis. For some reason the other 2 aren't introduced, but whatever. So basically, Ordis is essentially a huge village that consists only of the dead. Right, because the living are allowed to come there, but every night Ula will reveal herself and speak to them, thus killing them. Alright, because whenever the dead, or rather those that wish to die, because there are a lot of the living that come there that wish to die and live among Ordis. But in order to live there permanently, you have to die. Like, there's no other option. Alright. And of course you have to leave every night if you don't wish to die. So that is debatably my favorite story arc in the series. Of course, with the last arc, it's debatable, but the next arc only takes up 2 episodes. It's called the Goron Academy arc, in which after they leave Ordis, Ai is captured and taken to a place called Goron Academy, in which every student there is captured and taken there against their own will, and every student there is special in some way. Alright, so you have Tanya Sedgwood. Alright, Tanya was born blind, but she has the ability to use Rirrigan, which allows her to hear the sounds of places and things, and can even sense the shape of color. After escaping Goron, she allows the other students to stay at her parents' household until they decide what to do furthermore. And then there's Volrath Farin, who possesses excessive destructive strength. There's Hardy, who's a fat boy who is also Volrath's boyfriend. He has the ability to consume inorganic materials for his own sustenance. And there's Gigi Totogai. His age is actually 22, but since he has been asleep for 10 years, he has the appearance of a 12-year-old boy. And then there's Mimieta Gettenberg and Meme Po Gettenberg. Mimi is the first daughter and Meme is the second daughter, claiming not actual twins with multiple personalities due to the third daughter, Momo, who died and was later buried by a gravekeeper but remains alive within them. So basically, when they're touching each other really close, then the third personality can come out and speak and whatnot and interact. They are also born in a noble family. And then there's Rune Sagittarius, who can breathe underwater. So basically all the students there are special in some way. There's also Alice Culler, who has the ability of perfect aim. Alright, so he's basically able to shoot, and when he shoots, he can shoot someone else's bullets who also shoots at the same time, which is really interesting. So basically all the students there are special in some way, you know, and Alice, of course, is half human, half Gravekeeper, so that's kind of why she was brought there. Now, I do really like this arc as well, although it was kind of confusing because it didn't really explain, I don't think, why Alice was brought there, but in the end they do end up escaping together, and all the other students go back to their own families, but Alice ends up joining Yuri and I and Scar on the road. Alright. This review is getting kind of long too, I apologize for that, but I want to briefly talk about each one of these individual story arcs. The next story arc is simply called Where the Gravekeepers Are, or Where Gravekeepers Are Born, which is just one episode. Alright, it's just one episode long. And there's really no new characters introduced here. I forget what they called the area, but it's just basically just an area that I guess most people don't really believe to exist, but it's basically where the Gravekeepers are born. Simple as that. So in that episode we learn where the Gravekeepers are born, and then the last story arc, the fifth and final story arc, which takes up 3 episodes once again, is called the Class 3-4 story arc. Now this is the one that's debatably, like, it definitely rivals, I think, the second one, the Ordis arc, because it was just that fantastic, especially in the end. Alright, so also in the Goron Academy arc, you meet another character called D. Esni Stratmitos, who is actually a ghost girl, and you don't learn then exactly why she's a ghost girl. You don't learn until this arc. Both Alice and Dee ends up joining them, and they head to Class 3-4. And what Class 3-4 is essentially they end up coming to this, like, ruined city, it kind of looks like, and they end up climbing through a window, and they come to Class 3-4. And what Class 3-4 is an eternal loop, because 14 years ago, Alice ended up, although Dee originally thought that it was her, and that does lead towards some drama in the final episode there, but it was actually Alice who fell out of because Dee was falling out of a window, but Alice saved her, but at the cost of his own life. Because of that, all the other students in Class 3-4 couldn't stand it, so they strongly wished that it didn't happen, as if it never actually happened, and that came true. That created the infinite loop, in which every year on July 28th, the class resets itself. All the events that happened that year never actually happened, and it all just resets. Although for some reason I and Dee are able to remember. There's also a thing where if Dee goes out in the both of them are the only two that remember and able to leave that world. But for some reason, if Dee goes out in the real world, or in the outside world, she turns into a ghost. And there's lots of things here that aren't explained, and I will get into them as some of my complaints in just a sec here. But the plot is so unbelievably original. Almost 20 minutes talking about the plot itself, but I just wanted to get as much of it out of the way as I could, just to explain that the plot is so unbelievably original and creative, and I do definitely have to give it some points for that. Like, it's astounding, really. The characters' personalities, not so much, but I'm the type of person that can, of course, forgive that, you know, because I was thoroughly entertained by the series. Alright. So, yeah. Now, let's stop talking about the plot and talk about the characters a little bit more. The characters are all pretty well likable. I didn't really find a character in the series that I didn't like. Like, there was, like, during the Goron Academy arc, there was the teacher of Goron Academy that I didn't really like, because she seemed kind of a bitch, of course, because she was behind all the kidnappings and whatnot. Also, we didn't really get a whole lot of... We didn't really see her motives either, so that definitely gives me a reason to not like it all that much. But the thing is, she doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, so it doesn't really bother me. So in this series, there's not really a whole lot of characters I didn't like, and every character who gets a lot of screen time gets a lot of development. All right, so yeah, So in terms of the plot and the characters, I have no complaints, really, except for a few. Now, in terms of the plot, there's things that aren't explained, like, it never explained why Dee turns into a ghost in the outside world. Alright? It never explained why Dee and Alice are able to go to the outside world, why the two of them remember everything. It never explained that. Alright, I also have a problem that towards the end, now this is only a problem at the end, but towards the end, the pacing was really bad. Not really bad, but it went a little bit too fast towards the end, I thought, which is something I really have to say. I think it would have been better if there was an additional episode in order to make the pacing perfect. Alright. In addition to that, in the end we thought Alice was going to die. I mentioned this in my episode 12 review as well. Excuse me. So, yeah, in the end we thought Alice was going to die, and for no reason at all he survived, saying, you know, why the hell do you have to save me? You know what? I agree. I didn't really need to save him. Why did she? But furthermore, how did she? That's never fucking explained. That's my biggest problem with the series. That's what prevented the final episode from being perfect, honestly. Better than episode 6, which is my favorite episode in the series. Episode 6 is. Alright? But yeah, I just didn't understand that at all. Oh my god. So, yeah, that's my biggest problem with this entire series, which is odd, you know? Alright. So yeah, and also it doesn't really explain why Dee originally thought it was her that was died. Because it's all well and good, you know, we learned that Dee originally thought that she was the one who died 14 years ago when really it was Alice. But why did Dee, like, what made Dee think it was her, though? We never got an explanation for that either. Alright, so it's just some things that are just unexplained here. And I would say that they were leaving it for season 2, but it doesn't. But it kind of ends open-ended in a way as well. But it's hard to explain. But it doesn't really end in a way where they need to explain it in a season 2, because Class 3-4 is saved. Like, if Class 3-4 wasn't saved and the series ended, then I would say, okay, they'll probably explain it in season 2. But Class 3-4 saved, so they don't really need to explain it in season 2. I would love to see a season 2 of this, mind you, but they don't need to explain it in a season 2. So yeah. So that's definitely a complaint I have as well. But other than that, I don't really have any other complaints of the plot and characters. Like, they did a really good job with this. Now, let's get into the music. The music is beautiful. It's like most of the music consists of a lot of church choir-ish tracks, it kind of sounds like, which is really appropriate for this series, of course, because this is a series that deals with, you know, the fact that God abandoned the world a certain amount of years before the start of the series. In fact, you know what? That's kind of bothering me. I'm gonna look up and see exactly. Damn it. exactly how many years it was. 15 years earlier, yeah. So 15 years before the start of the series, God abandoned the world. So the church choir-ish themes kind of make sense. The ending's pretty enjoyable too, and so is the opening. And the opening also makes sense because, you know, it also sounds like something you would sing in a church, you know, and it's really appropriate for this type of a series, I feel. So really no problems with the music at all. Like, the music's definitely memorable. Like, it really is. Getting into the art I really love. It looks gorgeous, and the animation is incredible. Okay. I mean, let me tell you something. The animation in this series, I don't recall a single scene that didn't at least have decent animation. Not, you know, every scene didn't have perfect animation, but I don't remember a single scene that didn't at least have decent animation. And where it really counts, there is perfect animation in the most important scenes. Alright, such as the most emotional scenes, you know, and whatnot. And which generally happened at the end of each story arc. Alright. So yeah, so no problems with the animation or art either. So there is one more complaint that I want to mention about the story, though, that I forgot to mention before, which is the series revolves around, or the series is based off of the fact that 15 years prior to the start of it, the world was abandoned by God. And that is referenced many times throughout the course of the series. However, I don't know, I guess I just expected that to have a bigger bearing on the plot than it actually did, because, you know, we get several references throughout the course of the series, but for the most part, that doesn't really seem to be a big part of it. Especially in the final arc, where where that's only referenced like once, I think, and that's it, you know. It's mainly about D and I and Class 3-4, and not really about God abandoning the world. So I guess my final complaint about the series is that it doesn't you know, I kind of expected it to focus a lot more on that, and it doesn't. I'm kind of disappointed in that, I guess, but, you know, still, the series is still great. So I think I'm going to finally wrap this review up, though. I think this series is a must-see. If you're a fan of Madhouse, then they do not disappoint here. Like, Madhouse almost always, like, I don't think I've ever seen a Madhouse anime, actually, where they didn't deliver top notch, and this definitely it definitely shows in The Sunday Without God. It has its problems, in fact 7 that I counted, but I still think you should definitely check it out. I'm going to give The Sunday Without God a final rating of 8.3 out of 10. Alright. I definitely think it's a must-watch, especially if you're a fan of Madhouse anime, because they do not disappoint in this series at all. Alright, so yeah. But anyways, after this long-ass review here, I hope you enjoyed this review, guys. See you after, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.